It's the 6th of January, 2025. Coming up on today's Global Intelligence Agency Operations Report. Every country's military went to DEFCON One earlier today, and it had nothing to do with a nuclear threat. And governments are starting to come back to work this week, and there's a lot going on. First, the proxy minister of China, also known as Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, resigned earlier today. Later this week, we have former President Carter's funeral. Iran promises more strikes on Israel. And the upcoming inauguration of Trump make for a busy month ahead, as rumors swirl behind the scenes. And we know the real story. Well, we made it through another weekend. Welcome to Monday, everyone. For a lot of you, this is your first day back at work after the holiday. And it is, well, you could say the start of coming back to work for governments. Normally, they do not come back fully until the 15th of January, which is why they're trying to squeeze in that Carter funeral between now and then. So let's get to it. It's been a busy day, very busy day. So for us, it's more of, I guess you would say, not of the same, but we have continued that cleaning up process. We fired a shot across the bow on Friday on purpose, letting everybody know kind of where they stand, what they would need to do. Of course, they tried to use old lines. One of those lines was actually underneath the Hague in Netherlands. And the Hague in Netherlands, if you don't know, is considered the world's international court. It's tied to the United Nations. It has a lot of information as far as countries, taking countries to quote unquote their court. It also serves as a somewhat of a monarch court in some cases. It would override any country's court should it make a decision. And that's kind of just a brief overview of the Hague. Let's call it the one world government's legal system. But it also has some interesting other little tidbits that go along with it. Underneath the Hague, we had some old databases that were tied to the Alpha Omega system. And these databases would be very interesting should the deep state ever get a hold of those databases. Now, there are a lot of people touting that they have the fulcrum, they have even online they're saying it's with the McAfee files or something like that. But in reality, this was the database everybody's talking about behind the scenes. We have all the information. We're going to do all the things. Well, those databases were not accessible to them. Number one, they never were accessible to people on that level. But in addition to that, those databases had to go. It really had nothing to do with preventing exposure, because we tried on our side of it. We tried the exposure route before. And our exposure route, we utilized some of the data we pulled from the Universal Trust, which is run by the Silent Circle, aka the mafia organizations of the world. Universal Trust, just to give you a brief overview if I've never talked about it before. Well, I have talked about it before, but if you're new here, Universal Trust was formed around 250 years ago, maybe a little bit more now. And it was designed specifically to be a money laundering operation for mafia organizations worldwide. Mafia organizations are nothing more than another niche business, so to speak, for the Order of the Black Sun. They were created specifically to run the black side of the market, meaning things you could not sell on the market. And off-market trading. So they would trade things even like oil, off-market oil, It's not necessarily all human trafficking and drugs and all that, like, is portrayed in the movies, although that is part of it, I'm sure. But there's a lot of arms trading and, things that countries just don't want on their books. This was kind of all run through the Universal Trust. It was also an international laundromat. For about 35% of your dirty money, they would return to you clean money anywhere in the world, and they had their own financial network with which to do so there. On the flip side of it, people like the political operatives would utilize the information collected by this trust and the money collected by this trust to donate to various campaigns of political officials around the world. One such case not that long ago that went public was about the president of Argentina. I think it was Argentina, and it was a couple of years back where they said taken political donations from the Colombian mafia. Well, every politician pretty much has, whether they know it or not. And usually on election night, or selection night, as we like to call it, that information is then laid on the table to the incoming president, prime minister, head of state, and it's used to keep them in line. So should they ever fall out of line, we're going to announce we're going to destroy your political career. We're going to announce that you took money from this mafia or that mafia and you've got deep ties to them, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, you can just do exactly what we tell you to do. And that's usually what everybody does. So as far as new presidents coming in versus old presidents coming in, and it doesn't really make a difference because they're all controlled in the same manner. Now, the Universal Trust line went down more than a year ago now, but it doesn't mean that they don't use that information that they may already have in their possession to control various current politicians out there in the world. This is kind of relative to what's going on. So as it relates to The Hague, it's very similar information. The information that was collected by the database under The Hague had nothing to do with them trying to control politicians, for the most part. This was a recorder of black market transactions. It was a recorder of real history in some cases. We did upload the entire database, or the fulcrum, as you would call it, to our system before we got rid of the database there. But they had an intention of using this database, big exposure campaign, and of course making certain people that we all know look like a hero. Well, the other thing that they used this for was for control over countries. Not just control over politicians possibly, but control over countries. And this started kind of, let's just say, trickling out into the mainstream media within the last 24 hours. One such case was Justin Trudeau. Now, for those of you that don't know, I will tell you a little bit about Mr. Trudeau, as much as I would care to tell you. There are ties to Cuba, but then again, everybody has ties to Cuba. Hillary Clinton has ties to Cuba. There are a lot of ties with Cuba and various officials based on some things that were there in the past. Of course, Fidel Castro, sat there and, of course, was a trustee at one point in time for the Dragon families and a number of other groups. And as you know, it is probably the second largest, or used to be anyway, at one point in time, Russian foreign military base there in Cuba, based on the alleged Cold War. But yeah, there's some similarities between Cuba and Canada as of late. One of those main similarities are foreign military bases. And Mr. Trudeau is very much a Chinese deep state stooge, I guess you could say. He definitely is in their pocket. He also participated in the Surround and Destroy America program, which China deep state was advocating for quite a long time. And China did successfully build, mostly, I would say they are maybe a little bit more than two-thirds finished up there in Canada. Was one of the projects he allowed to happen in the country. It is also the reason why he was heavily promoting this the pandemic and all the lockdowns, and why Canadian citizens unfortunately were subject to a lot more restrictions than a lot of other countries, because they are so deeply embedded in China, and China had been giving money at some points in time to Canada. Now, in addition to that, Canada is also kind of a deep state money laundering facility unto itself. One such famous person you would know that laundered a lot of money in Canada would be Bush Sr. Bush Sr., when during his tenure as a Black Dragon, also laundered a lot of money in Canada. Mainly, one of the largest accounts in Canada for his money laundering operations was the fact he used the Black Eagle Trust, which was not his own personal money, to fund the Transneft pipeline that from Russia all the way through Ukraine. And he would enjoy $1 per every barrel of oil that pipeline. Part of the reason for the conflict that's going on over there in Russia and Ukraine, sort of, kind of, I should say. The second reason is the large gas deposits that everybody wants to own. And that's a long story and probably another report for another day. But we're talking about Canada right now. So recently, today, resigns. And the reason why he actually resigned is because the SSP, mostly American cowboy SSP sector, would like to insert their own shadow government there. And it was hard to do when you had such a loyalist to the Chinese dragon families. Now, the other thing they've begun to do since his resignation, which isn't even cold, it's still hot on the presses over there, at least in the face front in our mainstream media, is they've informed them that they're going to be taking over a number of bases throughout Canada. One of the sites they have their eyes on, to name one, I should say, out of several, is Nova Scotia. They would actually like to make Nova Scotia a sovereign country. I'm sorry, I can't help but laugh here. You gotta laugh a little bit here. They'd like to make Nova Scotia a sovereign country unto itself, without even looking to see if the base is still there. This would be under a citadel that is there in Nova Scotia, and they desperately would like to get their hands on what is there. Now, there are a lot of rumors that circulate that that is the quote-unquote treasury of the world. Well, not really. Depends on what you consider treasure, and in this case, it had nothing to do with money. I'll just leave it at that for public information at the moment, since this is all taking place as I'm talking to you, really. Of course, the largest base that used to be under Toronto that no longer functions, they'd like to have that. And they would also like to have the Chinese partially built bases, and they would like to place the U.S. military there, of course, run by them. Right now, everybody there in Canada seems to be a little bit shocked by their requests. I'm not so sure, there's some heated discussions going on, and a lot of this has to do with the threat of the information that is lying, or used to lie, underneath the Hague in Netherlands. And they are talking a big game, as cowboys often do, about all the ways they'd like to chop up Canada. So I highly doubt they're going to be successful in what they would like to do in totality. But as of this moment, They could get a person that is theirs and owned by them in the office there. That is a concern. They are definitely pushing hard into UK and a few other places as well. They'd like to, of course, be the world's shadow government, blah, blah, blah. Uh, lofty goals for such crazy cowboy people. They're used to doing this in part. And I say in part, which is the big clincher here, because they often would orchestrate a compartmentalized portion of an operation, say the fall of the USSR as an example. And because those guys are involved right now, so I'm using that as an example. Well, they did a small portion of it. So there's the breakdown, then you had the economic guys in there. Clearly, those economic guys are no longer with us because otherwise there would be a few brain cells left with the cowboys as to the things that they try to do. And we've got some more that they've tried to do today. I have to laugh. There has to be a laugh here. Okay, so yeah, so they forget that they only ran a part of the operation, even though, of course, there's a lot of people that told them, great job, you did this single-handedly, blah, blah, blah. They did not. There was always someone behind the scenes, always someone pulling the final string, always the last person with the plan Z, and normally that person would be ground commander. Now, I'm aware of all of this because I do have, I should say, the Marduk fulcrum of all his operations. So I learned a lot from looking over 16,000 years worth of operations. And I can tell you right now that none of them know about the final keys. If they did, they wouldn't be wasting their time right now. But nonetheless, they all, of course, are going to insert themselves in every government everywhere, and this is where they're going. And Canada is no exception here. So is the new boss the same as the old boss? Well, yeah, pretty much. They just would like to be in control versus the other people. Are you going to see more Chinese military bases if that happens? Probably not. And we probably won't see a Chinese invasion over the Canadian border, which is a bonus. But it's not going to be in any better shape than a government anywhere else at this time. So that is the story behind Mr. Trudeau and his resignation. They talk a lot about his, let's just say, indiscretions, budgetary things, and that's just basically because everywhere China goes, they suck all the money out. That's a common theme. And if you look at the cookie cutter processes of countries that have fallen or been divided, you'll see the same thing happens everywhere. So that's kind of the situation there at the moment. I will probably keep you updated. I know we have a lot of Canadians that listen to our report. So I will keep a close eye on it and see what else is going on behind the scenes. Right now, it's a lot of talk, a lot of demands, and a lot of junk, and China had another big failure over the weekend when they gave out a bunch of master codes to a bunch of systems they don't have and don't control. It was just like I had said, when the SSP and Trump operatives fail, China throws their hat in the ring. They fail, the Trump operatives or global headquarters gets mad at China, and then China has to give up. It's like playing Monopoly. They have to give up one of their hotels, the big red ones on the board, and that's what they did, I guess. But unfortunately, none of these people own any of this stuff. The other thing they think as well, and there is a lot of talk, not to the Canadians per se, but amongst themselves about unleveraged assets in Canada. And I can tell you right now that is not the case, not the shale, not anywhere else. There's nothing there you're going to leverage and put into a banking system. As much as you'd like to try and issue bonds and run a financial system, Yeah, no, that's probably not probably, it's definitely not going to happen. You see, the UK actually turned everything over to us, so did France, and other parties that have been participating in the Canadian region. I'm going to call it the Canadian region, all the way back into the days of the Inuits and when they were running the show. And I mean, there's been liens going on for a long, long time. And we have all those. So kind of another, useless exercise for the SSP, but you got to let the cowboys run at least until you can find them and hunt them down like dogs. Okay, next thing the cowboys are doing. Cowboys, it looks like there's also quite a bit of a struggle going on in Iran right now. There was a decently sized and a looks like a very low populated area of Iran today, an earthquake. And it looks like there's a little bit of a struggle for the cowboys to also take over Iran and push out China. There is a huge announcement that was made by Iran saying that they are definitely going to be striking Israel again soon. And that is 100% for 100% certainty, in cooperation with the Israeli shadow government, also known as the SSP. So think that they were all hoping that they would be having some money by now. Of course, the money call that was supposed to happen on Saturday didn't happen, and then they pushed everybody off until last night around 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, in which Langley 5 drew the short straw, hosted that meeting, and kind of gave out a bunch of hang in there. We're going to get there. We're going to win at all costs. I don't think they're sure of what they're winning, but that was definitely a big push. Okay. Next, the Carter funeral. Lots of talk about possibly using the funeral to create a false terrorist attack, a false flag terrorist attack during the funeral. This is what I'm hearing. Most likely that false flag terrorist attack would come from an African nation. That's what they're talking about behind the scenes. They're not having a whole lot of luck on getting the African continent involved in their World War III plans, or 4 or 5 or whatever number we're on now. So this is the alleged talk behind the scenes. They are looking for the token passport, which they always leave by the token bombing or whatever they're going to try to do. So just so you're aware, if you happen to be a good, decent person and you happen to be working in that area on behalf of the government, just so you're aware, be careful. There's a lot of chatter out there. Also, I am watching things closely to see what happens then. This could also be used as a diversion for a lack of a quantum financial system that they have been promising is going to be launched on the same day. The further to that effect, they are also talking about using this to push off Inauguration Day. They, of course, would blame the deep state. It's definitely not the patriot cowboys that did it. Of course not. No way. We're going to hunt those people down like a dog. And, this might be delayed. And yeah, it's probably not going to work out because most of their operations don't these days. This is just another ruse, so to speak. But they definitely are struggling with the idea of pushing it off or not pushing it off, because there is, like I said, there's a lot of lack of money hanging in the balance here, and a lot of promises and a lot of checks written that they cannot cash. So so much so they're doing crazy things. And one of those crazy things today is they actually tried to register Trump bucks. Oh, yes, they're still out there. And Trump Reserve bank cards, where they were trying to register to a Pentagon communication line which backdoored to American Express. That was one part of it. Oh, poor people, can't find any money to keep operations running. Why not try to run Trump bucks through a back door of American Express? Yeah. So that was actually permitted by the Pentagon. They like that. That is not a Chinese hacker or anybody else. So if it comes out in the news as such, that's a full-on lie. That is your cowboys that are suggesting that is a good idea. The next thing they thought was a really good idea is there was another backdoor, or backbone, I should say, that was left within the stock markets. And they tried to install Trump bucks, not the reserve bank cards, but Trump bucks into the stock market to be utilized as legal tender to buy stocks. Why would they do that? Now, there is a lot of chatter talking about the 15th of January that the Treasury Department will be officially broke. And by Treasury, we're not just talking about the US Treasury, we're talking about treasuries worldwide, or the Black Sun's limited in the past financial control system. So they are talking about debt calls that are coming up and so on and so forth. And they are also talking heavily about a market crash. Now, why are the two tied together? Well, they're technically not. This is not that kind of debt call to the best of our knowledge and what we could find out. But if they are going to allow for a market crash, then they need to buy up all the stocks at pennies on the dollar. Now, they got this idea from Rothschild, and I know that because I heard it from a Rothschild's lips to my ears in 2013, that this was always the plan. They are going to crash the United States economy and buy it back at pennies on the dollar. And the stock market is one of the ways, or in part, that they would do such a thing. Hence the reason why they'd like to make Trump bucks legal tender. I cannot stop laughing at the cowboys today. Sorry about that. And hence the reason why they thought that this was a great idea and a great way to allow for the market crash to happen this week, so that they could then buy back the entire country of the United States and all its corporations for pennies on the dollar with Trump bucks. But unfortunately, we had something else in mind today. And maybe we were just watching and waiting and watching and waiting to see what it was they were up to for the last day or so as they set all these things up. And we had a little bit of a thought process of our own, interestingly enough. So we had been setting up some things for quite some time anyway. And we were just waiting for a good time to pull the trigger on said things. And one of those things is for the full integration, obviously, of the Golden Age AI and any kind of Alpha Omega allies or anybody else's remnants that are here, and the removal of those things from human computer systems and networks. And we figured out that every time we would install something, allies would mimic, or Omega would overlay, or, and then of course you got the dumb humans involved, the cowboys. So today looked like a good day based on all their alleged progress thought that they were making. So it started with the Pentagon, and the Pentagon went to DEFCON One and couldn't get off DEFCON One. So this sent everyone in a panic. Shortly after the Pentagon went to DEFCON 1, Russia went to DEFCON 1, China went to DEFCON 1, UK went to DEFCON 1, Germany was at DEFCON 1, South Africa, Argentina, Chile, and it went around the world. It was the shot heard around the world, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. This had to do with the severing of ties from backbones and platforms that were tied to all the things that they were working on. But it also had to do with the fact that we had to completely ensure that there were no more what we call tags or secondary tags or any kind of lines or quantum tunnels or anything that they could utilize for something else. Because some of these back doors into American Express and whatnot, these were trickled down old, just kind of like holes, I guess you would say, to put it in non-computer terms. They were holes left there by Marduk or Maiwa or someone like that. So we let them set everything up, and then we pulled the plug, DEFCON One. And part of the reason why we decided to do this today is because we were aware, as we said earlier, as I said earlier, I should say, I don't know why I'm talking about myself like where are we. As I said earlier, well, we, the GIA, said earlier, but it's only me tonight, that there is a Marduk dead man switch, because we said earlier we had Marduk's full playbook, so to speak. So we understood that this was going to happen, and we just waited till the opportune moment to do that. I wanted to kind of see too how our report on Friday night landed. Did it land on deaf ears? Of course, they're going to win at all costs. I'm not sure what they think they're winning at this point, but that's fine. And shocked the sugars out of everybody. It did. And it was actually pretty funny to watch. I even called Tom earlier today and I was like, hey, Tom, what the heck's happening? The Pentagon went to DEFCON 1. That's funny. Anyway, shortly thereafter, it was probably there worldwide for maybe about an hour, hour and a half. They tried to take it off, DEFCON 1, go back to 3. That did not happen. It reverted right back to 1. And we played this game for a little while together. But of course, they still don't recognize the fact that I'm ground commander. But maybe today they'll get a clue that that is the case, because who else would have access to Marduk's old lines to pull the trigger whenever they wanted to? So big progress for us on that front. But as far as with the people, probably not. I don't know. They're still reeling about it and pretty angry about the fact that they don't control their own situations and their own systems. I know the SSP is pretty angry today, and oh well, I've been pretty angry too in the past. But it's been a busy day today around here, as you can tell. We expect more alleged resignations, not necessarily. I know there's probably a lot of happy Canadians right now thinking that this is going to turn the corner for Canada, but you're just going to basically go from the left hand to the right hand. So we'll see. We'll see if they actually manage to pull it off, but everything they're pretty much looking for in Canada, it's not going to be there, other than the fact they'd like to control the northern border. And what's next? I don't think they're going to have AMLO in Mexico. AMLO is the president of Russia, Mexico. Boy, need to get some rest. He is the president of Mexico, and he has done a lot of human trafficking, profiteering with, in cooperation with former Vice President Pence, and has a deep relationship with the CIA. They run a lot of money through Santander in Mexico. So I would say he's more Black Sun and would play right in the pockets of the SSP. So I'm not expecting a resignation there unless it's just for show. He'll still be profiting greatly off the SSP's human trafficking and drug trafficking over the border, I'm sure. And they're going to say, oh, look, we secured the borders, blah, blah, blah. It's all who's going to profit off the borders. I wonder if the Texas Rangers will have anything to say to the SSP folk. Probably not. They'll probably make a deal. New boss, same as the old boss. But that's what the plan is. I know that there are probably some calls that are going to be taking place as the SSP feels they now control Langley fully 100%. And there are some calls that they are orchestrating that are going to take place with field offices in multiple different countries to ensure their or speed up their insert the shadow government of their liking for the SSP program worldwide. That's what I'm hearing. They think they are going to win a war by doing this, and they're not. They're just playing their compartmentalized role without taking a look at the bigger picture or the rest of the chessboard. They have one rook, one piece with blinders on that doesn't, it's a horse with blinders on and it doesn't know where it's going. So, you know, we're just watching them play. They're like playing chess with a pigeon. It's one of my favorite little memes that's out there. They fly in, knock all the pieces off the board, crap all over the place, declare they won, and fly away. And you're like, what happened? And you pick up all the chess pieces, put them back on the board, and continue to play the game. Wipe it off, maybe. And that's what we're probably going to have to do with the planet, as these people just don't seem to quit. But, we will survive this. We've survived a lot worse. We've lived under a lot worse conditions than we are living in right now. And I know it doesn't feel that way every day for you. And I understand that. It doesn't feel that way for me either. But we will survive. Have a little bit of faith in yourselves. We are moving forward rapidly. We're pulling everything that we can pull from these people. So they'll have very little to quote unquote fight with except for their big cowboy mouth, which is actually playing to our advantage, believe it or not. You kind of sometimes when you've got an enemy like this, you sort of got to let them run a little bit anyway. And they're running, they're doing absolutely nothing that is going to change governments or countries at this moment. And they've got a short window to run. So right now that window ends around the 21st of January. They might be able to push it to February, but the lies are coming home to roost. And you've got some really angry, and this isn't just Americans, this is worldwide, operatives out there right now that have been playing the game, quote unquote. And this comes from one of them. If we don't get what we've been promised by February, he said, end of January, by come February, we're not listening to those stupid Americans anymore. And this will do what we need it to do. And I know that sounds strange, but think about it for a second. Never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. So play that one through, and we'll leave it at that for now and for tonight. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and end the Global Intelligence Agency report for the 6th of January, 2025. Got to remember 2025. And I hope you all have a wonderful night. And hopefully we'll have some more updates about what's going on in Canada come Wednesday. That's my hope. And we'll talk to you then.